My mum always says to me, and I say it to myself, anytime I go and do anything that makes me nervous is what's the worst that can happen? Because when you stop and think about the reality of what we do, the worst that can happen is pretty mild. They don't laugh. They don't like me. I forget what I'm saying and I stand there looking like a dick. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually not like my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, my partner's brother, they are doctors and they go to work each day and they save the lives of babies. What's the worst that could happen? Pretty bad. I don't know. It just helps to remove a lot of that fear and the kind of hesitancy towards failure.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Wowie, what a treat we have for today's chat. Hayley is chilled, warm, fun, funny, has a great energy about her. Plus, the flow of conversation was so easy and fun. Hayley is a great role model for achieving success in the entertainment field. She has unique insights and is true to herself. I found her mantra, "What is the worst thing that can happen?" really interesting. We dive into it for a bit and it makes for a great listen. So let's get into it and officially introduce today's guest. Hayley Sproull is an actor, comedian, TV and radio host, writer, director, and is New Zealand's jack of all entertainment trades. You may recognize Hayley immediately, having been the host of Have You Been Paying Attention? And the Great Kiwi Bake Off for the past 3 years. She currently populates the airwaves too on ZM's Fletch, Vaughan and Hayley's Breakfast Show. Hayley burst on the scene in 2012 after graduating from Toi Whakaari, New Zealand Drama School with a Bachelor of Performing Arts in Acting in 2011. Her passion for theatre and comedy led her to create a number of successful comedy works and earned her an array of praise and accolades, including Best Newcomer at the New Zealand International Comedy Festival back in 2012, the Chapman Tripp Theatre Award for Most Promising Female Newcomer in 2013, and Best Actress and Best Composer at the Wellington Theatre Awards in 2016. She was also nominated for a New Zealand Film Award in 2014 for her role in the short film School Night. She's also been a writer on many series including Jono and Ben, 7 Days and Funny Girls, with a weekly segment Hayley Bailey featuring on the Jono and Ben show. She still regularly creates comedy content and fits in with acting roles whenever she has time, and most recently you may have seen her in the sitcom Golden Boy, which premiered in 2019 and ran for 2 seasons. Hayley has also hosted many events including the 2018 Comedy Fest Gala, the Queenstown Winter Festival, Big Wednesday at the Classic, and the Basement Theatre Christmas Show. When she isn't writing, performing or composing, you'll find her on the marching field with her team Royal Command. So as you can imagine, we dive deep and we cover a lot, such as Hayley's passion for marching, culture and belonging, PCOS, creating pathways for success, starting radio, hosting a bake show, being a goth, my favorite word, pivoting, entertainment, and juggling multiple professions. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode.
I know you've spoken about this a lot, but I find this very interesting, and I think this could be a great place to start. Yes. Please tell me about what marching does for your soul.
What marching does for my soul, so much. So like marching in Australia, you guys have a bit of marching, but it's not the same as what we do. But it's derived from, similar to many things in Australia. You actually took it from New Zealand and changed it slightly and called it your own.
Oh, I'm sensing some hostility.
No, I'm just drawing attention to it. But yeah, the kind of marching we do in New Zealand is like all female, drill based patterns, movement, and that kind of stuff. And I've done it since I was 8 years old. And it's my passion. I'm lucky in life to have two passions. Most people don't have one. So I've got one I could share with other people if they need a passion. It's in my family. Like my granddad did it and my mum did it, and she was a coach, and all my aunties. And then I got into it. And it's just like, marching's great because like what I do, which is like, you know, I went to drama school and I was freelancing and got into comedy and then TV and stuff. It's also like wishy-washy, whimsical. And then you go to marching and it's black and white, like nothing else can exist. It's right or wrong, like your foot is here or it's here, or, you know, like there's no guessing with it. And it's just where I can, like, even though it's very stressful to make time for something like that because it's quite time consuming. I don't know, it's just so good for the brain when you've got this sort of life that's so topsy-turvy to just go and like anchor somewhere in this ridiculous sort of cartoonish sport.
It sounds like, because the life of a comedian and all the 1,000 things that you do can kind of lack structure in a sense.
Yeah.
And so this gives you structure for what it sounds like and also grounds you, which sounds actually awesome. Yeah,
it's very disciplined. Like it's military based. So a lot of the way that like my old coach, who was like the most famous coach in the history of the sport.
I've heard about her.
Colleen Pobar. Yeah, she was a battler and she was a really, really hard woman. And people would be like, why do you volunteer to like go spend your weekends being yelled at by this old woman? And I was like, because it's like, it's rigid and it's regimented and it's disciplined. And I like that. I thrive on that. Maybe not being yelled at, but like, you know, just kind of it being really clear what someone wants from me and what I can give them. And then they tell me, correct, you've got it. And then we move on, which, yeah, as a comedian, right, you never get that kind of immediate feedback. It's always like, oh, it's sort of subjective. Oh, I don't know if that was good or if I'm doing well. Whereas with marching, it's like, no, you were wrong. Do it again until you're right.
That's very interesting. I like it when, you know, I also lack structure. So when I do something like that, whether it's like basketball or having like certain classes, it like kind of puts you in your place. But it's also taught you a whole bunch of stuff as well. You've traveled the world. You've met so many people. It would have given you this kind of, has it given you like a quiet confidence, even though it's not entertainment, but it's still in a light. Yeah. Okay. Tell me about that.
Well, no, just like, again, it's that like the subjectiveness of comedy or entertainment, right? People go, they can like you, they can not like you. It doesn't actually sometimes reflect whether you're very good or not. Whereas with marching, like I marched at the top level of the sport, at the best place you could ever march, Edinburgh Military Tattoo, for the best team in the history of the sport, for the best coach. Like there's no question that I'm a phenomenal marching girl. There's probably questions whether I'm a phenomenal comedian or not. So
agree to disagree.
It does give you a confidence because you are like, I'm being told all the time, like, you are great, you are fantastic. And people watching and they go, wow, in terms of marching. So yeah, it gives you a confidence. Also, like the most people I ever marched in front of was 42,000 people in one night.
Wow.
In one night. And like, that was incredible. And so like knowing that you have the ability to do that, be it on your own or within a team, I don't know, that's pretty like empowering and for your confidence.
It really is. And to be a top performer in anything is amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very proud of you. And you're very busy. You do a whole bunch of things. I think you did, or maybe you still do, you commit every Sundays. And Sundays can be the day of rest, especially for someone that's going out Saturday nights, maybe performing. Why do you still keep on continuing?
I actually march Saturdays and Sundays now because the season's cranking, and we do Wednesday nights. So this is what people are like, what are you doing? I don't know. But it's like an addiction. It really is. It's like, I've been asked so many times, like, why do you do it still? And I don't know, it's just so immensely fulfilling for me and like so rewarding, and it just keeps me connected to who I am. So I always make time for it. It's an incredibly like emotional part of my life, you know, because it's so steeped in history for me that when I leave it, yeah, my family and the friends that I've made over the years, you know, some of the girls I've marched with since I was a kid.
Wow.
And so when I try to leave, which I have a couple of times, like taken breaks to focus on my career, all I do is like think about it.
Oh, it's like a full obsession.
Yeah, it's an obsession for sure.
That's very cool. And I've written down so many points. And I like how you talk about how it's like it's instilled in the family. Is it something like your family like talk about as well? You guys like at your okay.
Well, it's just so my granddad has 5 grandchildren, but because he was a marching coach and I'm the only one of them who marched, I am like the favorite. Like you used to go around to his house and it was like a shrine to me. It was like all my marching photos on the walls. And then I think at a point, maybe my auntie, whose kids don't march, I think she went round and like added some photos of the other grandkids to be like, there's more than just Hayley.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And my mum's still really involved in the sport. Like she's always kind of been involved with my teams, helping out. And she coached and stuff. So we talk about marching all the time. I literally just got off the phone from her before talking about how was training this weekend. It was a good training, you know, so it's very like active in my life.
It's so awesome when someone can find their passion. And you said you're lucky that you found 2. I wouldn't say it's luck, but there is a luck component. But you know, you work and you try to find something and you commit to something and then you get better at something. And I assume the other passion is entertainment.
Yes. I'm glad you said entertainment because I was going to describe it as entertainment because I have a hard time describing what I am because I host, I got an acting degree, I do comedy, I do a little bit of theatre, I'm now working in radio. So when people say like, what do you do? I'm like, entertain. I entertain people.
It would be the most, even when people ask me and I do like a 10th of what you do, not that it's a competition, like, it's such a hard question. And then sometimes people look blankly if they're not like quite familiar. Do you find it stressful?
Yeah, I find it stressful when I'm coming back into New Zealand and on the arrival card it says occupation. Do you have that? Do you have that going into Australia?
I think so. Yeah. When I go to I used to just say accountant because I used to be an accountant. It's so much easier.
Yeah, so much easier. Do you know the other day I was in an Uber? Oh, this was in Melbourne. And I was hosting the Aussie, Have You Been Paying Attention? And the guy, I was really tired. And the guy was driving me to my hotel and it was like, what are you doing? You know, how are you? Where are you going? And I was like, oh, I'm just visiting for the weekend. And he was like, what are you here to do? And like the idea of me saying, I'm a comedian and I'm here to host a TV show felt really exhausting. So I told him I worked behind the scenes in radio.
Oh. And it's like, okay, put the radio up high and
yeah. I don't know. I just was like, oh, I don't know if I can get into this because then you get those questions of like, oh, I work in television or I work in radio, I work in whatever. And they're like, what have you done that I would have seen? And then you're like, dude, nothing.
Well, my son, he's really interested. Can you have a coffee with him? And
I know. Yeah. Oh my God, he's got a really funny comedy script. Is there anyone you could send it to? You're like, no.
It's but that question, people don't realize from the creative side, it actually is very stressful. And it's also stressful because most people don't quite understand it. I don't know about your family environment, but were they all okay when you said you wanted to be, I think the goal was actually to be a playwright or work in your own plays, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it was pretty obvious, I think, for me that I was going to go this way. I feel like it wasn't really a choice. It was sort of the only path, cool. Which is like good because I think a lot of people do struggle to like, you know, heading towards the end of high school and what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Whereas for me, it was like I could only do entertaining or performing because I'd kind of been doing it my whole life, not in a official capacity, but like that's my go-to instinct. If I'm at a party, I'm really trying to like work the room. If I'm out and about, I'm trying to like catch people's eyes. And I'm having a conversation, I want to make sure that they're really enjoying it. So it just was quite a natural progression. My my parents did send, so I'm one of two. My brother lives in Melbourne. And we both got sent to very, very expensive private schools. And that was because for him, I think he hadn't quite found his way. And for me, it was because I was so attention seeking. I could really easily get distracted.
Yep.
And so, you know, having like smaller class sizes and all that shit would really appeal to my parents so that I wouldn't get lost. And then at the end of high school for both of us, my brother left high school to be a musician and I left to be an actor.
Oh, wow.
And so they would have spent hundreds of thousands on this like education, science, English, maths. And we both just went, no, the arts. And we're so lucky that my parents, or just from the get-go, were like, yeah, go for it.
Oh, there was no like, well, why don't you get a real job? None of that.
No, never. I know. It's so, I almost wish that they had, so that I, you know, had something to be angry about or like a point to prove. But they were like, go children, go. And they like,
That's awesome.
Yeah, it is pretty awesome. And they always support us, whether it's like, you know, my mum, you know, is so braggy about, oh, that's my daughter on TV. But she was also like equally as proud when she'd come to one of my like obscure solo shows very early on out of drama school, where like for some reason I'm not wearing any clothes and, you know, like cheering way too much. And she'd be like, I love it. This is good.
Do you think that she's actually listening? Because when you're performing, you're probably talking about your parents, your upbringing, and the parent would just be like smiling, that's my daughter. But then if they're actually listening deeply, you're probably so embarrassed as well when they come to a show as well. Sure, you love them, but...
So I feel like sometimes they must be embarrassed. I use my parents a lot. I actually made a show about my mum's mum, my grandmother. And my mum, it was a comedy show, but it was, you know, about the way that she died and what that meant for me connecting to my culture of being Māori, because my grandma's Māori. And my mum was in the front row of the first night, and she like audibly sobbed from about 15 minutes in till the end of the hour. And I think it was really lovely, but you could see the audience being like, oh my God, this woman's beside herself. But that was sort of lovely. And yeah, my dad came to a show maybe a couple of years ago, and I flashed my boobs, and it was like a jokey moment as part of this kind of skit I was doing. And I remember, like, my dad didn't say anything. He was like, I love the show. But I remember thinking like, oh, my dad hasn't seen my boobs since before they even arrived.
A nice family bonding moment.
Yeah, like he's never seen them. So yeah, they don't get too embarrassed.
What was the eye contact like afterwards? Was it just looking around? That was a great show.
My parents are pretty open. They're pretty, I've got cool parents.
You really do, because it is very rare. My parents are super supportive, and I've got the most supportive parents that I know, but it's still very rare in this space that they get it, because then finances come in. Parents want you to be like safe and protected, and the life of an entertainer, there's ups and downs. You might not be working for a period. So that is very cool that they just let you grow into the butterfly and spread your wings.
Yeah, they did. And I mean, to be fair, when I left when I was at drama school in particular, because drama school is a little bit more hands-on, you can't get a job while you're there. So I definitely because you work on the weekends and you rehearse late at night a lot of the time. So you could maybe like potter in a job, but nothing sustainable. So I definitely like called the bank of mum and dad over those 3 years.
Of course.
To say like, I need $100, or I need some groceries this week, or I need that. And they were always like, oh, okay. You know, like they were never.
They're never like, do you want $200?
Yeah, especially when they'd see a photo of me like out that weekend with a bottle of wine and a packet of cigarettes, and they'd be like, excuse me?
I think that's really cool. And in terms, I've got so many questions, but this just springs to mind. In terms of, you know, being an actor in New Zealand, there are a lot of famous New Zealand actors. Have you considered moving? Because the New Zealand market is smaller than the Australian market, for example. And you hear about so many Australian actors maybe struggling in Australia. You're not struggling by any means, but not really getting consistent work in Australia. Then they moved to America. You've been I'd say fortunate that you've been able to do a whole bunch of things. Is that a consideration to try out different markets?
I think so. I think it was much earlier on, like when I was so determined that acting was going to be what I did, I think it was definitely like, oh, I'm just, there's no jobs. That's why I was like making all this theater and writing all these plays, because I was like, no one's putting me in anything, so I'll just have to make it, which is good because then you learn all these skills. But I think just it sort of I don't know how it happened that I ended up branching into these different forms like TV and radio and comedy and whatnot. So I think had I not have been able to like scatter myself across multiple things, maybe I would have, if I was like, no, I'm an actor, pure and true. Yeah, there's not enough work here in New Zealand at all to sustain a career or one that would pay for your bills solely by acting. So I never really had the pull to like LA or anything like that, the Hollywood kind of thing. I wanted Hollywood to come to me, like I sort of imagined more of a career path. I always look at the career of Jermaine Clement from Flight of the Conchords.
I love him.
Like they started in New Zealand and they made themselves big in New Zealand with what they did. And then America was like, hey, we'd like a bar of that. And now he's big in America, but he didn't have to go to America, rent a shitty apartment, wait tables and be in 20 audition rooms in a week. I just think that dream or that vision of what an successful actor has to go through was never quite my cup of tea.
Yeah. I think it's really awesome though, because we've had this example where people are like, I'm an actor, I'm only going to be an actor. But you realize that wouldn't sustain yourself. So you actually went in and you tried. And I know that you've done a lot of plays and you've written a lot. It could be still quite, I'm not sure what the right word is, but I don't know if it's disappointing because people think when they go to acting class, they're going to get that next big role and they're going to be a superstar. You actually went in and tried so many different things. I want you to talk more to that because I think that's so awesome. And as you said, you learned so much and you grew your skills as well.
I think as well, like as you accept the impossibility of success, as you're sort of leaving drama school and going, oh, I've been offered one play that pays me $500 a week. That's not going to work. As you kind of accept that and you become really, what's the word? Become really, oh no, I'm not going to get the word.
And you've caught whatever I've got.
It's like but resourceful, you become
resourceful. Beautiful word.
And you start to go, okay, well, what skills do I have? So for me, I was like, I play the piano. I got an acting degree. I'm a good actor. I love making people laugh. I've always enjoyed English and writing. So I was going like, yes, I just studied acting, but I'm actually really good at a number of things. How can I combine those and so that I can be a little bit more varied and a little bit more exciting for people? And so my first instinct when I left was to write a solo show that basically showed anyone who watched it what I could do. It was like
nice.
It was like an actor's showcase, all wrapped up as a play.
Yeah,
and
genius.
I played this teacher who talked to the audience, and she was very funny, and the show was very silly, and she sung and played songs on the piano. And I was like, I'm really showing people I'm so much more than just, another actor. And from that, I really feel like things would pop up. So then someone else goes, oh, we're actually doing a show and it would be great to have an actor who played the piano. Oh, okay, well, I'll do that. And then, oh, it'd be great. Oh, so you actually sing. That's fantastic. We're doing a thing here. And do you write music? Well, I can, yes. Or did, and it kind of just goes from there. And then the kind of moment it started to pay off was, I made a bunch of solo shows and they all did really well. Like one of them toured the world and toured around Australia, and I had a really good time. But then with all this writing, people were like, you're a really funny writer because you're writing these plays for yourself. And then I ended up writing on a comedy TV show, and then I ended up being on it. And then once you're on it, people start to know you, and then it kind of went from there.
I think that's really awesome because in this world, sometimes, there's no like one right path towards success. And you just putting yourself out there and then people seeing you literally has opened up, you put in the work, but opened up so many doors. And we've heard so many times on this podcast, and I'm the perfect example of this. I've done this, so they should know who I am, but they don't know who we are. They don't know what we're thinking. They don't know what we're capable of. So I love how you first started this play as a disguise to like show all of your abilities. I think that's amazing because that's how we get out there, especially in this world, is showing the world what we're capable of.
Yeah, and I was lucky that the drama school I went to, Toi Whakaari, which is the national drama school, they, in the time that I was there, they had a really big focus on making theatre, which was kind of great. Like maybe back in old school days, it would just be about picking up a script and then delivering it or delivering a good character or whatever. Whereas like when I was there, it was a real focus on how we can make work from scratch, how we can see something, as opposed to just relying on script. So it was really like, that was already in me by the time I left to go, yeah, well, if the work isn't there for me or the characters that I would be good at aren't out there for me, then you can just write them and make them.
I love that. Were you stressed going through that? Like when the money's not rolling in the acting? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think my first show, Miss Fletcher Sings the Blues, which is that show I was saying was my like my skills showcase, was my boyfriend paid for some of it. I didn't pay anyone who worked on the show. I couldn't afford to hire a keyboard, so I called my friend's dad who owned a moving company, and he moved my upright piano from my house to the theatre so that I could have a piano to play on.
That's so cool.
And then I was I got these little business sponsorships because my dad owned a finance company, and so I got like $500 from Pioneer Finance and $500 from his lawyer and $500 from his accountant. And
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I put their logos on my poster, which like to them they were like whatever. So yeah, you kind of made it on a smell of an oily rag. And then, you know, I think I got back from box office like, I can't remember what it was, like $2,000. And I was like, oh my God. Like
you made a profit. Most people don't at the start.
Yeah, I know. I was like, I'm rich. So yeah, like financially it's always scary. And I remember, but I don't know, I just think when you're achieving something the way you want to achieve it, any money was so exciting to me. Like I remember I did my taxes at the end of my first year out of drama school. And I rung up my dad after I looked at my annual earnings. And I was like, oh my God. And I rung my dad and I said, Dad, you're never going to believe this. I made $11,000 this year. And he went, oh my God. And I went, isn't that amazing? Because I was like so overwhelmed that I had managed to do that from acting or theatre or whatever, you know?
Yeah.
I didn't even know if it was that much. Maybe it was like 9 or something. But yeah, it was amazing. Me calling him up to tell him that my annual salary, my annual earnings was $11,000.
I love that contrast between you and your father. But did that keep you going, knowing that you can actually make money? Sometimes we need proof.
Yeah, totally. And I think I was always like investing in the next thing. So kind of knowing that this might not be the thing, but is a thing that is leading towards taking me somewhere. And I don't know where it was. Like I definitely didn't expect to end up hosting and doing radio and stuff. Like that was never in my vision of what I wanted to sort of be, but I knew it was all kind of leading somewhere. And I don't know, it's just, I mean, that's the beauty of New Zealand as well. Like, yes, there's less work here, but when you do work and it kind of goes well, word gets around so quickly. And our, like, for example, our television industry is so insular. Like once you're in, you're really in the rotation of being in. And that's where I am at the moment with TV. It's like I'm in the machine and they know I'm there, and so they'll put me in a few things. And then eventually maybe they'll spit you out. But while you're in it, it's quite self-feeding, which is awesome. Yeah, it's really good. Like it's one of the benefits, I guess, of being part of a smaller industry.
So with that, in terms of success, you know, we mentioned at the start that the goal was to do like plays and then somewhat create a brand for yourself. And now it's expanded into so many different areas. Did you have very strong goals after that? Or you're like, let's just go with the flow and see what happens?
I sort of have, I definitely changed. Like I went, okay, well, this is working over here. So let's just roll with this. I'm making some money. I'm having fun. people are starting to know who I am, and that draws them. I was always about like, how can you draw them towards what you actually do? So going like, sure, I can host this show or I can MC your event, but if that means you're going to come to my comedy show at, this little independent theater, that's fantastic. And when that started actually translating like that, I was like, oh my God, it's working.
Nice.
So that definitely, I was open and still have remained. Like, I mean, I've only started working in radio this year, and that was a really tough decision for me, even though like, it's a really great fun job, and it's got good money, and it's quite secure radio. I was like, I don't know, because that looks quite different to what I had in mind,
Interesting.
Yeah, I did. I really like hesitated for a while. And then I was like, no, because every time that I've taken a little pivot, it's paid off, and it's really like fed back into what I do. And I feel like, with TV and radio in the last couple of years in particular, like people are interested in Hayley Sproull, whatever she's doing. So they don't think of me as just, oh, it's a radio. You just do radio, or you just do this. They're like, oh, I like you. What are you doing next?
Oh, okay. You said my favorite word, pivot. Okay. You need to write a book, because I think this is so amazing. And it goes back to what you're saying, like you at the start, like just being an actor, but then you create so many different opportunities. And I'm sure like the New Zealand Bake Off, for example, you probably never thought in 1,000 years that you'd be hosting a show like that. But it's not just you as the performer, you are a performer, but creating so many different opportunities and seeing where you go would also be a very exciting way to kind of live as well, I would imagine. Yeah.
I think you just have to be like, you kind of have to have your head turned on. And I'm great. Like, I'm really lucky. I've got a partner he's a director, and he works in the arts, and he's really intuitive at going like, don't see it as selling out. Don't see it as that. See it as an opportunity to make an opportunity. Like basically going like, here's an opportunity presented to you. How can you then take that and go, all right, I'm going to say yes to this, but I'm going to work it so that it really benefits me. So going, okay, I'll host a baking show, even though that felt quite off-brand. But when I'm there, here's how I want to be presented. Like, here's how I want to look. Here's how I want to behave and talk and, be silly and all these things. And then they go, cool, yeah, you can do that. And you go, great. I thought it was like a stiff baking show, but actually they just want me to be myself.
I think that's awesome. And in terms of radio as well, like in Melbourne, the people that are on radio, the comedians that are on radio, like seem to sell out the most shows. So I think it's like a really good opportunity in that sense. But you mentioned it was very hard. Can you expand on that?
I just think I got concerned that this whole time when whether I've been working a lot or working a little, I've never worked Monday to Friday. And being kind of committed to something that size really freaked me, because I was like, oh, I've always had the ability to just change or go away or like not work or work a lot. And then the idea of kind of being married to something, I was like, ooh, a bit kind of, oh, is that going to stifle me? Is that going to get in the way of other opportunities that might come up? It's always the thing, right? Like, you say yes to one thing means you're saying no to another, but you can never know. So what do you do, So that was definitely a big part of it, was the size of the commitment. And then just, trying to sort of gauge like where my image was at the moment and how people see me. Because I always would get nervous, I started hosting Have You Been Paying Attention in New Zealand, and I was hosting the Bake Off. And then people were doing these interviews with me, and it was like host of da-da-da. And I was like, well, that's not true. But I also, love when people call me a comedian, or love when people call me a performer. And I got worried that I'd be kind of like boxed into host and that, anything like acting and that stuff would kind of disappear. So that was kind of my two main fears, was like the size of it and the appearance of me as host.
Would it also impact performing like late at night if you're doing stand-up, for example?
You would think so, but it hasn't.
Ah.
I'm lucky that like I run on very little sleep, and I don't have kids.
I'm so jealous.
I know. But I don't have kids. I'm young. I'm 30. Oh, I'm 33 now. it feels like the right age to be kind of burning the candle at both ends for me, or the right time in my life. So yeah, I've been doing a lot of late night gigs recently, and last year I was rehearsing a show, and I just leave from radio and go and work a full 10 till 5. I work 5 till 10 at radio and then 10 till 5 on at rehearsals, and then the season at night. I don't know. It's just,
I don't know how you do that. That's crazy.
No, neither. And it's not, I don't encourage people to do it, but I'm just in this time of like seizing every opportunity, and it just feels like I can.
Do you feel like you're in a flow state, that it's easy?
Yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
even when you get a job like radio that is maybe a bit more stability, and there's that mentality, like you don't have to say yes to everything anymore. Like you don't have to say yes to every MC gig or stand-up gig or whatever. I just haven't lost that. It's not a need maybe as much anymore, but it's like a desire to, because radio felt like such a pivot. I feel like I still need to be scratching the itch of entertainment, comedy, performing live audience, like people looking at you in the eyes live, like that's the juice for me. So, and it was also a little contract I made with myself, was like, I can take radio, but if everything else falls by the wayside, then I'll leave because it's not working.
You guys are doing really well. I think you got like one of the highest ratings in like your radio as well. Yeah, you're killing it in your first year as well.
I won't claim that, because Fletch and Vaughan, who are my co-hosts, they've been on air together for 18 years. So wow. Yeah, like they have a very loyal fan base, and I'm just kind of lucky that they have stuck with them and kind of me joining in.
I've seen a few clips, and I think that you play like with the trio really well. And that can be really hard when you're joining something that's already established. But it seems like you've slotted in really like easily, and you found your voice, which I'm so surprised. I would like you to talk to that as well, because when you're coming on something that's been there for so long and you're kind of like the newbie and you're trying to figure out like, who am I, what am I, how am I going to present myself? Has that been a challenge, or has it been something you're working on, or is it easy?
Maybe I'll find out if it's easy if I talk about it, because I don't know. It does feel easy. I remember when I first said, I'm gonna be on radio with Fletch and Vaughan next year, and people went like, there were a few kind of things of going like, well, how is that going to work? Because like Vaughan's the funny one, and so Vaughan's the funny one, and Fletch is like the boss and the kind of wrangler of everyone. So like, where will you fit in? And I was like, well, won't there just be like more funny?
Why does it have to be?
Yeah, like these roles. And it did make me a little nervous for a second. I was like, oh, shoot. Because there is a very old-fashioned structure of radio, which is like funny one, boss, girl, which is not a role.
It took me like half a second. Like, wait.
Yeah, like that was sort of the image that people were saying to me, like, funny guy, the boss, and the girl who's there to be like the moral compass. Oh, boys. And I was like, oh, shit. Like, if that's what they've hired me for, they have made a terrible mistake.
I had no moral compass.
I have no moral compass. I would definitely say it's been easy, and I give that to the boys again, because they've just got it so under control. They're so easy with it now. Like I have a friend who is also starting out in radio, and he's starting in a new show, and I feel he works so much harder than I do, and I respect that so much, but sometimes I feel terrible because I'm like, God, the boys that I work with are just doing such heavy lifting because it's so easy for them now. They just have this unspoken language. And then in terms of the like, where do I fit thing, I just didn't have to curate a persona to fit them. I didn't have to. It just sort of, they kind of adapted with me, and we
nice.
share the laughs around, and it does just feel like we're all laughing with each other. So yeah, I can see how like going into an environment like that could be difficult to find your place. For me, it hasn't been, because of the way that they work together and are so fluid and just like cool and easy with it.
You're very generous. You also play a role in that. But it's also very interesting in terms, we're talking about perception and how we want to be seen. And, you're obviously creating a brand for yourself and you're doing all these different things. It's interesting, though, that when you're talking about the radio, you've just talked about how you've been like more you. And there's been less of a focus on perception because perception can be very important. So I'm wondering, like, what is the balance of like, you talked about hosting the New Zealand Bake Show. You want to present yourself a certain way. Does that occupy a lot of time in your mind, or do you feel like you've kind of, what you're about?
Yeah, I'm quite lucky in that people generally want me to be myself. It's just like what parts of it you enhance is the difference between the jobs. So I would say like radio is the rawest version. One, because I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. And so, yeah, like as if you're going to be like carrying a persona. You're lucky I'm here, and because it's this, like what we're doing now is just what I do every day. It's like, you are interesting, I'm interesting, we're chatting, we could keep going. Stop it. But, like we could go for hours or we could go for a 4-minute break or, whatever. It's very off the cuff. You are who you are. And I'm pretty unfiltered, which I think maybe their audience has been like, oh, why is she talking about her butthole so much? But I'm like, because
I think it's great that it doesn't sound like you have much doubt.
No, not there. And that's quite nice. Definitely like radio feedback in terms of like the immediate response is like slower than I'm used to, with like a live audience and you do comedy, they laugh. Whereas like here you are just chatting to mates and sometimes, you're not all laughing and hooting and hollering the whole time. But yeah, like that's probably the only thing for me that was like the hardest. But I do feel confident there, even though, yeah, you're not getting that immediate feedback just because it's kind of nice and easy. Whereas like when I host, I'm still being myself, but I'm just kind of cranking up that.
Oh, no, you've cut out.
Oh, yeah. I'm back. No, I just mean like I'm still myself when I'm hosting. It's just that I crank up the boss element of it, the I'm in control element, which is in me, but it's just not up and out all the time. So yeah, I'm lucky that I don't really have to like put on any kind of
but I think
huge mask to do those jobs.
That's kind of like, that's amazing. That's kind of like mastery level because so many of us are very concerned with how we're perceived and we want to just do the one thing. But it sounds like you know who you are. And so that there's many different elements that makes Hayley Hayley. And so you can activate the boss, you can be like the straight man, or you can play and have fun. And it seems like you're not judgmental to yourself and you don't overthink these things too much, which is very important also in the world, but also as a performer. Have you had to work at that, or is that just kind of the way you were born?
Dude, I don't even know if I've noticed that until you've sort of said it.
That's good.
Yeah. I think I have found it's not an arrogance or anything like that.
No, it's a knowing.
I still have so much doubt and, insecurity about being good enough and funny enough and all those things. But I don't know, I think you feel it in the work when you're in the right place for you. And I feel like I do that. And a lot of people say, not to toot my own horn, but people are like, oh, you're so good at this, or you're so good at radio, or you're a great host. And I'm always like, oh, I feel a little bit like I'm cheating because it's easy. So, I feel like, maybe it comes from marching where I'm like, to be good at something, you've got to like work. Whereas if this, I'm like, I don't know, it feels very natural.
I think, okay, I'm absolutely obsessed with this. And I spoke about this on one of the last podcasts. It's kind of like a lie or like a trick in the world where and I had this so I can speak to it, where it has to be so hard. We have to really feel like we're sweating. We have to put in those extra hours.
Yeah.
And in my experience with that mentality, for me, has been a disaster because what am I trying to prove? It doesn't make any sense. The goal is actually for life to be as easy as possible. Easy in like, you're actually not just like lying on the couch doing nothing easy, but if you're good at something and you work at it, you want it to be easy, because then it's just, as you said, natural, it
I
feels
know.
good, and that's the goal. And I really hate how people are like, you have to put in 20 hours a day to work. Still need to work hard, don't get me wrong. But that concept of it has to be hard, it feels so like multi-generational, like let's just throw that in
know.
the, yeah.
I think I think I do have a lot of that, and I wonder if that's why. Because people always say like, "Why do you need all these jobs? Like, why are you saying yes to this and this and this and this?" I'm like, maybe that's the thing. It's like because some of the jobs I have, I find easy, and maybe there is that mentality in me that I'm like, I should be working harder. Like, it should feel harder to be successful, as opposed to like, why don't you just have a day off? Why don't you just sort of like chill out for a bit?
But it's credit to you. And I just want to like re-emphasize, like you have put in the hard yards. Also, to balance this much is crazy. I don't know how you do it, but it's not like you just clicked your fingers. Like you mentioned at the start, drama
Right.
school's still pretty intense. You're working hard. You're not earning a lot of money. You're creating these plays. You're hustling. You're getting like sponsorship deals, which is really creative. There's a lot that's going on. And after many years, you're now like the queen of New Zealand entertainment industry, and hopefully Australia. And I think that's really awesome. It just didn't happen like that. You've worked really hard, but you've been able to like play and have fun. Yes, there've been like struggles and challenges along the way, but you've like learned and grown, and you've always been like onto the next thing in the most positive sense of the word.
These are really nice reflections because you don't often like stop to think about that
Yeah.
and go, oh yeah, actually, yeah, maybe things have sort of clicked into place now and you feel like maybe you're not working hard enough, but you do forget like, no, you worked really hard at the start so that you could not work this hard anymore. So yeah, thank you. That's a nice reflection.
And like also like, for example, on that, like as an actor, most actors, even the very inverted commas, like successful ones that we see on everything, they're not even working like half the year.
I know. I thought about this the other day as well when I was looking at someone's IMDb page, and I was like, God, they're doing one film a year.
Yeah.
And obviously for that film, they're getting paid X amount of $1 million for it, so you probably don't need to. But yeah, you do go like, wow, like that actor's everywhere, and you're like, well, they're probably on a couple of 3-month shoots, and the rest of the year they were skiing in France.
I've had so many actors on this podcast, like with over 100 credits, and their resume is brilliant. But then if you were to really look at like probably the timing, I'd be surprised if they're working more than 3 months in the year.
Yeah,
and that's okay. They put in the work, they work hard, they've worked to get to that point.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that they're not lazy. That's just like, it's okay to have breaks. And I'm sure you've had a similar. Actually, I'll just give an example with me. When I first left accounting, said this example 100 times, but I wanted to prove to the world I'm going to be the best screenwriter or a working screenwriter. And so I was literally in my room or in my office, pardon me, for like the entire day, not doing anything to prove to the world that I'm working hard. But that was so stupid, because now if I write for like 2 hours a day, it's so much better than the 20 hours a day.
Oh, I know.
And I'm able to have balance in other areas of my life, and the writing's better as well.
I know. And it's also about, I'm the same, like, because I've been trying to write a film for about 7 years.
The marching one?
The marching one. And it is so hard. And every time I'm writing and I'm like, this is so hard. I'm like, Hayley, who told you that writing a film was easy? Because, you think of these films and you're like, yes, like Hollywood makes a lot of rubbish as well. And you don't want this to be rubbish. You want this to be one of the ones that is like, has a bit of integrity. So it is hard. And I would spend heaps of time being like, I've got to get this done. I've got to write more pages. But like the only stuff that is any good is like the first 2 paragraphs. And then you're like, the rest of it is just me trying to generate mass, trying to generate just like pages so that it feels like I've accomplished something, but the quality of it is just like crap. And then you're like, well, that was actually a waste of my day.
Yeah. Well, what I've noticed is like sometimes I write a huge amount, and then I've had to change my mindset. I can just go and review everything and change it, even a few words or just a structure or something, and which might look like nothing, but it's still given me more clarity on the
clarity. Yeah, for sure. I love doing that when you're like, I'm lost, or I'm at a dead end, or I've hit a wall with this script. So I'm gonna go back and read scenes 1 and 2. And then like each time you're like, this is a funnier word, or like this is a better surprise, or this is and it gets better and better. God, it's hard.
I know I've been writing so much stuff, and fingers crossed I might have a production deal soon, but I don't know if I can say that yet.
Oh, fingers crossed indeed.
Thank you. And it's very interesting. Some things like it's not that I give up. I just go, I'm going to come back to this later. I'm going to do something else. And you've been doing this, what do you say, for 6 years. So what's made you keep on coming back?
We did the same. So I've been co-writing it with my friend James Ashcroft, who is an amazing director who's watched this space. He's about to blow up. Ooh. And we were at it and at it and at it. The reason that keeps me coming back is because it's about marching. And I'm like, people have to see a film about marching. The world is ridiculous. It's so intense. Yep. And people just have no idea. So if someone's going to write a film about marching, it has to be me. Like, I have to do that.
You're the spokesperson for it.
Yeah, exactly. So I can't just walk away from it. But we did take a break and we wrote another film. And we wrote another film in like 6 months. Because I don't know. It was just like, we were just at this dead end. We're sick of it. And we just couldn't see the light of day. And then we read this little novella, this little horror novella. And we were like, let's step away from female, well, it's still female led, this film, but like this female comedy sports film, and write a grotesque kind of shocking horror.
That is so different.
I know, and we wrote it within 6 months. To be fair, we did have like a base, like the little novella was really helpful, but it was just like good to like purge like flush the mind of that film and then put it all into something else. Wrote that film nice and easy, 6 or 7 drafts under the belt, and now it's ready and locked and kind of it's being shopped around, and you're like,
oh whoa,
nice. Okay. And then you come back to the marching one, you're like, right, what did we learn? Nothing, maybe.
Well, I've written, I've probably got about 6 or 7 screenplays, and I actually find that when I stop one to, well, let's get them made, if anyone's listening.
True. Very true.
And I've actually found, and everyone's process is different, that even if I might not finish that one at that time, it actually informs the other one. And it's also like a metaphor for life is, you don't not learn skills. You still carry on those skills. And that's kind of like speaking about your life, everything that you've done, like you've literally seen all of it. And I think that like carries forward in some capacity as well.
Yeah, it is nice to feel yourself upskilling. And because like it's hard, like I learned piano as a kid, and I still play, but just for fun now. But like it felt so, I don't know, you had to like crunch, scales, learn, practice, and then you'd learn a song and there's the achievement. And like it's so hard to get that kind of reflection of upskilling when you're working in something as fluid as like creativity. Mm-hmm. Like, am I actually getting any better? Am I actually any funnier than I was a few years ago? Am I actually any more eloquent or, well-spoken, or am I any better at writing? And that you can kind of feel that, because you're like, well, if I was better, the movie would be finished. And you're like, well, not necessarily. And very recently I was trying to talk to someone about the script that we've been working on. And I went back and I looked at the very first, we wrote a short film version of it.
I saw that on IMDb, actually.
Yeah, and it was like we did it for the drama school, and their third-year actors performed in it. And it was this little taste of like, I don't know, the little taste of the world. And I looked back at that script, and oh my God, like it's shocking. It's the poor, even the way that I didn't even have final draft, and I was using Word, and it was so bad, and like I didn't know what big text was, or how to sort of paint the picture. And then you go and read your latest draft, which you think is rubbish and is never going anywhere, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so much better.
That's a great way to,
time.
It's such a great way actually to go back to things, just to see what you did at the start and how it's transformed.
Yeah, it's so funny. Like it's so funny.
I've said this before, but it's still, I cringe, but it's still a good lesson. Somehow I got a meeting with like a Netflix executive. First thing I've ever written. I wouldn't say I'm a naturally gifted writer. I didn't know anything in the space. I was just kind of writing from like life experience. It was funny, but it was not good. And
Right.
she took the meeting with me and gave some advice. She obviously didn't buy it, and I'm actually grateful that she didn't buy it. And I've looked back at it, I'm like, oh my God, I met with this lady and I showed her the worst thing. I'm sure there's like grammar issues and typos and structure wise. And it's I still cringe thinking about it, but now I'm like, whoa, look how far I've come. But it's also
Yeah.
hard to do that sometimes in this space as well. Which
It's
can be a
so
bit hard.
funny that moment that you choose to open up. We shared a version of the script. We got to the end, right? And we were like, okay, at least it's complete. We know it's not finished, but it's, it's got a first page and a last page. And we sent it off to like what would you call them? Like a dramaturg or like someone who reads scripts basically and critiques them.
Oh, like a script consultant or something.
Yeah. And we sent it off to her. We paid her. We were like, give it a read. And she came back with this like 7-page critique of the thing, which we really appreciated. I mean, that's what you're paying for.
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, guys, what a world, to bring an audience into. The characters, and we were like, fuck yeah, like, here we go, man. Get us on a set. We're about to make this film. And that was like one paragraph. And then after that, it was like, and that's about where it ends.
Oh.
And then the rest of it was just like, there's no plot, there's no structure, there's no stakes. So we were like, but isn't the character funny? Yeah, is it good? Do you want to watch it?
I've received the best feedback I got from a person not in the industry was, so for people that don't know, Final Draft, it like has the correct layout.
Yeah.
So every script looks exactly the same. And someone goes, I really like your layout. That was the feedback.
Okay.
I was like, oh, thanks. I didn't make it. What? I've received
what
all
about
of
the
it.
content of it? Oh, jeepers.
But it is like going back to it. I think it is like really nice when we can have these moments when we look back and go, you know what? I may have not feel like I've progressed in certain ways, but that is like a tangible way of saying I've actually grown. I've learned structure. I've learned something. Even if it wasn't good, I still learned about screenwriting. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think like who said you can write a good film in a year? Maybe some people do, and maybe sometimes it takes 10 years, and that's fine,
The Queen's Gambit was something like that.
Yeah, totally. Or there's that documentary on Netflix, which is like the movies we watched or whatever, and it talks about it. And it was like Forrest Gump was on the table for like years, and people were like, oh, I don't want to make that shit. And then Tom Hanks read it and was like, okay, I'll accept a really low fee to do this film because I really believe in it. And only then did people get interested in it. And then it got made.
Wow.
Because they were all reading it being like, this isn't very interesting and it's sort of nonsensical and da-da-da-da. So, yeah, I don't know. I think the route to being a writer of a film is, I don't know, just unpredictable.
It takes time.
It takes time.
This also just sprung to mind, like in terms of like the hustle and how you've worked at this, you've been in the industry, you're well established. You've mentioned like people have helped you along the way. Is that something like in the world especially, but in this industry, you need people to kind of help you. And you've talked about like collaboration. You've had people help you, whether it's like finances or you've had your fiance like help and talk about ideas. Is that something that you focus on?
Yeah, my fiance literally just got home.
Oh, good timing.
Hey. Sneaking past with the beer. Yeah, definitely. I always, because sometimes when you look at what you're doing with your career and then you think back to like, oh, maybe I didn't need to go to drama school, for example, because you go, oh, I've gone so far away from it, which is not true. Like you use all those skills. But like one of the things I've always been grateful for was like relationships, because when I was at drama school, it had like a production arm, a tech arm, like lighting and, all that kind of stuff. Designers, like graphic designers, costume designers, other actors, even the dance school. So you like made all these incredible relationships for which to like go out into the industry with. And we all kind of were helping each other in the start. Like the first show I made with comedian Chris Parker, we got into a room together and my partner, who's a director, we were in such a mess, and he made us show him the show. And we were like, there isn't a show. And he was like, well, I want to see an hour of content. And he made us show him this show. And we made the best show ever. Like, it was so
nice.
great. And then we took it up to Auckland, and we realized that we needed some help. And so another actor kind of came in for free and did all this like shadow work in the back, you know. So like little things like that, people boosting you up is really so like vital at the start, to have people who believe and are going to push you up. And then like I've always been such an advocate for like making strong connections and putting yourself out there, like introducing yourself to people. The job I got, my first TV writing gig I literally just emailed the producer and was like, I don't think you've got enough women on your writing team. I'm moving up to Auckland. I really think you should give me a job. Like, barely knew this person. And she was like, oh, okay. Yeah.
Give me the job now. One of my girlfriend's good friends, she, back in the day, she just called up The Simpsons and said, hey, I want to write for you. Which I'm like, what? She goes, yeah, I just called up and I wrote with them. I'm like, what? You can do that?
Yeah, you can. And I think that's the thing, is like we're kind of tiptoeing around or like relying on the power of the audition. We are like, oh God, honestly. Yeah, exactly. Like, who are these people that are so powerful they can make or break you? When actually, like, you're a lot more powerful in yourself if you just kind of go, oh, I'm just going to go and I'm going to mingle at this thing, and I'm going to force myself into this conversation with that person that I want to work with, or send this email, or invite this person to my show. So instead of auditioning for them, you know, they can come and see my stuff.
I think it's brilliant advice, and it doesn't just apply to like the creative arts, is that sometimes we just like, you know, we expect someone to come to us, but I really think it's so empowering to let the world know as well, not necessarily the other way around. Yes, you've been tapped on the shoulder and people like do this and do that, but it's because you've also shown the world what you're capable of. And, you know, sending that email. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. No, that's it. That's it. It's just going like, the shoulder tapping can happen, but it's not like, I don't think you should ever try to base a life on being tapped on the shoulder, you know, or like this concept of the big break. You're like, oh, I don't think that happens anymore, you know, unless you're like Tyra Banks in a mall and someone looks at you and goes, you should be a model, you know, like that doesn't really happen anymore. So I feel like if you were to just wait for it, you're just letting all this useful time go by, not doing anything.
I agree. And then like, you're a great example of this, is that you created avenues for you to succeed and be seen. And I think that's one of the key takeaways that I've got from this podcast, is that you don't need to rely on the gatekeeper or the audition, that you can actually do stuff or put stuff out there. And, you know, if it's good and, you know, you're actually good to work with, and you've maybe, you know, you build strong connections, which is all important, eventually something will happen. Or I'm a big believer of that.
Yeah, me too. And it's also like, I mean, it's cheeky as well. Because you go, like, you get a script right for an audition. There's a TV show filming. Here's the audition script. And you read the character and you go, well, I can do that. That's not really my strength, this bit, but okay, I can do that. And then you show up and then they see that bit's not really her strength, but she's good at this bit. Whereas when you're creating your own work, you go, okay, I'm going to create a show that's going to show me off. I'm not going to include shit that I'm not good at, because that would just be stupid. I'm going to only include the stuff that I'm the best at. And then people are going to be like, wow, what an incredible talent. But all you've done is like sweep all your like shit skills under a rug. Yeah. And people just assume you have those skills, but you're like, no. I don't. But you just think I'm incredibly talented because I've shown you the stuff I'm really good at.
That's like the goal as well, to like show your strengths. Doesn't mean you can't work on your weaknesses, but like, why show the world how bad you are at certain things when you can show them how good you are?
Totally. I probably am not going to play Lady Macbeth in my life, but
who knows?
You know, who knows? If I keep working on the things that I'm good at, maybe that side of me will get better.
That's very wise. I wanted to tie up one thing before we did a rapid fire segment. Actually, there's two things, but we'll see how we go. And you mentioned that you did a play, and I think this is really important because we've spoken about so many different things. But where you talked about and please correct my pronunciation, it was a show about, I think it was your grandmother and your Maori ancestry. Is that the right way of saying it? And
Maori. It's hard. It's hard for Australians because it is spelt Maori.
Yeah.
But yeah, But yes, I did. I did make that show.
And that was from what I've heard on like other podcasts and stuff, that was like a bit of an emotional response because obviously you got your mum responding, but then there was some vastly positive, but there was some, I don't know if the word's like negative feedback, if that's the right way of saying it. How did you kind of deal with that? Because you're showing a side of yourself. You're talking about your upbringing, you're talking about your feelings, and then there's very few people that might not be happy about it.
How I dealt with it at the time was I locked myself in an Airbnb and I cried for a day.
I think that's very healthy.
If I'm being honest.
Yeah.
It's such a like complicated journey, that one. Yeah. It's a really complicated show, that one, because in my eyes I made a kind of a light show about what it is to be Māori but not feel Māori, and for that to kind of be highlighted at the passing of my grandma, and everything that happened in that play was true, and like a kind of account of me coming home from a cultural experience in India and finding out that my nana had passed away, and all these questions coming to light. I think the thing that, to understand why it was why some people responded negatively to it, is you kind of have to understand like the seriousness, I guess, in which Māori culture is perceived, or like, the weight of it that a lot of people carry. And I think this was a number of years ago as well. I think we're better at it now, but I think a lot of people see comedy and think that it means light or like piss take, as opposed to going, no, comedy is just the vehicle in which I choose to talk about these things that are very important to me, or that are maybe deeper than a laugh or two. And I just think at the time some people struggle with that. Like I'm white facing, I'm white presenting, and I think to be making a show about being Māori, there were some people that just, I think, found that kind of hard to digest.
Yeah. And I think it's also like really cool that you wanted to explore and share this side of you. And I know we can talk about this for hours, so we'll keep it at high levels. It is still like really awesome that, you're going through, I guess, your grandma and the grief there, and you want to show the world and talk about like the positives of, this impact in the relationship that you've had. Were, in terms of like the aftermath, because as I said, even like looking, and I heard people talk about, vast majority of people absolutely loved it. It did really well. Then there's just a small number of people understand like the cultural aspect and comedy and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. How did you cope like longer term? What were the takeaways?
Yeah, I think for me it was like, I felt like, I was quite young at the time as well. Like I was 26 and I was getting a lot of kind of commentary, I guess, from like older people about like, you can't do that. And so I did feel quite like overwhelmed at the time. I think moving forward though, I just always remember that like, I didn't make up anything. It was my experience. And I think a lot of the like good feedback that I did get from the show was more than just, oh, I enjoyed it, or I found it really funny, or, whatever, haha. So much of the feedback was like, oh my gosh, this is my experience, but maybe not being white presenting Māori, but being like Polynesian, but in, growing up in a different family, or any kind of way that people connected to it. It was definitely like, I don't know, there was a lot of people that connected with that feeling of not quite being able to own your own culture. So like the more I heard that stuff, I was like, okay, well that's, like I'm not just sharing this, one person's opinion. It is a shared experience. And two, I think the thing for me is like, it was about my family, and my family saw it. I was about my family, and my family saw it, and they were, not only did they love it, but they were incredibly moved and proud of
amazing.
It. So I'm like, at the end of the day, that's actually all that matters. And a couple of people that are a little bit angry that a young white girl is, having a laugh with her own culture. I'm like, I'm good with that now. At the time it was tough, but now I'm like, I stand by it. And actually I think it was the best show we made.
Yeah, that is beautiful, because it's very interesting, when you're performing, it doesn't matter what you talk about, someone's going to be unhappy. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
The goal is to minimize it as much as possible, but also be true to yourself. And obviously, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that would have impacted confidence, maybe sense of self at the start. But now with reflection, it seems like it's made you stronger going through that. Am I putting words in your mouth? Is that how
No,
you
not
feel?
at all. It also made me a better performer for sure. Like I was hesitant to ever do the show again. I did it for 3 seasons, and then I was like, oof, yeah, I think that might be me with that one. But
Yeah.
that's okay. Like it scared me off a little bit. And then I got back on the horse and, made more work and stuff. So yeah, I have gained a lot of confidence from it. One, because of, overcoming feeling like I've done a bad thing, I've made a bad show, or I've offended people. And two, because I genuinely think doing that piece of work and really like trying to figure out what I was saying, so that when people were saying, you can't do that, I'm like, no, I'm really clear on what I'm doing here. I think that just made me a better performer all round, because I'm not just like plodding around the stage. I actually have like an intention, and I actually,
Yeah, that's important.
like am doing something here beyond just wanting to entertain you. So yeah, I think it was a good experience overall.
It sounds like a fantastic experience, even through the lows. How did you get back on the horse?
What year? I'm trying to think about what year this was. I mean, I had lots of support around me, which was quite good. And I just got really busy. The next show I made was very personal as well, but I made it more about myself growing up, as like the phases that I went through, being like a goth and an emo and stuff. So it was a lot easier content to play with. I don't know, you just get back out on the stage and then it's fine, you you always remember at the end of the day, it's just theatre. And I know that we all want to think that we're changing the world, but it's an hour of people's time and they can leave and life goes on. So you kind of remember it's actually not the end of it all if people didn't like me.
And also as a positive, like the worst case is they just don't like you and they forget about it. That's pretty much the worst. The best case is, you actually, for example, in that show we spoke about, someone has a better relationship with their family or their culture or their heritage, or it raises questions, and that can actually
Totally.
propel people.
That is literally my mum always says to me, and I say it to myself, anytime I go and do anything that makes me nervous, is what's the worst that can happen? Because when you stop and think about the reality of what we do, the worst that can happen is pretty mild. They don't laugh. They don't like me. I forget what I'm saying, and I stand there looking like a dick. You know what I mean? Like, it's actually not like my brother-in-law and my sister-in-law, my partner's brother. They are doctors, and they go to work each day, and they save the lives of babies. What's the worst that could happen? Pretty bad. Like for me to go out on a Wednesday night and do 6 minutes of jokes and people don't laugh, you have to put it in the context of like, what is the worst that can happen? Because actually, I don't know, it just helps to remove a lot of that fear and the kind of hesitancy towards failure. Because the worst that can happen in what I do and what we do really is pretty okay.
And I've heard you mention that quote before, so I assume it's like a mantra that you carry with you quite a lot.
Every day, like
Nice.
almost every day, because I'm, with the nature of what I do, I'm always putting myself in situations that maybe make me feel a little nervous or a little unsure. Last week I was performing in front of 3,000 people on a stage.
Nice.
The week before I was performing in front of 40 people. Every morning I perform in front of hundreds of thousands of people, and you're like, I don't know, it's a little something that kind of reminds me of the silliness of what I have chosen to do as a living. Not that it can't change lives or that it can't be immensely positive for people, and that you're not, making people's days better and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of it, like, it's like, oh, it's all going to be okay, because really I'm just trying to make people have a chuckle if you like boil it down.
That's a great perspective. And I'm jumping the gun here, but you mentioned you were a goth, and I had in my notes that you grew up as a goth, and I think I saw some photos, or you did like a TikTok video or something. Please tell me about this, because I don't actually know anyone that has gone through the goth stage.
I feel like everyone knows a goth.
I went to a very like sheltered school, so everyone was like the same.
Well, kind of so did I. Like the school I went to, like the high school I went to, and as I said, it was like very poncy kind of private school. But when I got there, I mean, I'm an attention seeker, and I think that's what it came down to, was like,
But a goth, yeah.
Yeah, I got to high school and I was like, okay, like how can I stand out in this place. And there were these girls in fifth form. There were 3 girls, Beatrice, Jaja, and
Jaja. I've never heard that name before.
yeah, I can't remember the third one. No, not Keely, not Karen. Anyway, I've forgotten her name. But these 3 goths, and I remember seeing them walk down the hall, and it was like falling in love. I was like, oh, who is that? And I loved it, and I was like, that is so cool. And then I just started listening to the music, and I got into like Marilyn Manson and Korn and I don't know, Cradle of Filth, and I just loved it. And then my friend, like 2 of my other friends, Amber and Ashley, kind of got into it at the same time. Ooh. We were like, let's just do this. Let's like go all in. And so, yeah, dyed my hair black and started wearing a lot of petticoats.
What did the family think about that phase?
They were okay with it. I think my mum was at first a bit like, oh, what the hell is she doing? But I also think she found it really funny because, you know, like being such a class clown and suddenly I'm really like trying to take myself very seriously, mum. I think she found it quite entertaining. And I think my dad was just like, you're like a freaking idiot. So yeah, they were okay. I was lucky. My parents were renovating our house growing up, and my mum let me draw on the walls before we renovated my bedroom. Oh. So I was drawing like pentagrams and like witches and stuff all over the walls. I just loved it. And then like, I kind of transitioned out of that and went a bit like emo in my later teens. And yeah.
So what's the difference between a goth and an emo?
So like a goth is like full, like, I don't know, like I always think of like kind of satanic, like black hair, black lipstick, black nails, like all black, big chunky boots, really kind of spooky looking. Whereas like emo was like, I don't know, bright colored hair and massive fringes and like a bit kind of, I don't know, more fun.
That's hilarious. And were you the cool girl with your like, group of girls at that stage?
It was kind of interesting. I don't think I was the cool girl. I mean, I've always been a confident girl, which people have always drawn to. But at my high school, and I say this genuinely, I think there's a real rep for like all girls schools. But there were not popular groups. By the time we all became old, like sixth form, seventh form and stuff, everyone was kind of just like themselves. It was really strange. There was no like cool group.
How many in your year? Because it's exactly the same experience in my school.
I can't even remember, like 70, 60.
Yeah, I think that's the magical number. We had roughly 70. Yeah. I can't really speak to the girls, but all the guys were all like friendly or friends. Yeah. There was no bullying.
Yeah, we were the same. Yeah. Like everyone had their own interests. Like I was part of the arty because I was really into drama, right, at that point. So like the arty group, but also most of my friends weren't. And then there were like the girls who played sports and stuff, but we were all friends. So it was kind of the strange, yeah, maybe it is something about just having smaller numbers just means like that you can't have these little groups.
I think it's nice because when people like you see in TV, like they've got the cool group, they've got the jocks, and I'm like, am I the jock? Like, no one was the jock, but we don't have that like click. And I always found that so weird.
Yeah.
And I've never got my head around that. Maybe
it's pretty cool, to be fair. Like it removed a lot of like nervousness and drama, I guess, from being a 17-year-old, 16-year-old.
Agreed. Last point before we do a rapid fire segment. And this is also one of the topics that we could speak about for 1,000 years. So we'll navigate it. But I think this is really cool of you. You've spoken about PCOS, and I didn't realize that it impacts 10% of women, which I think I didn't even know what it was until I started researching about you. And I think this can be quite informative. Can you tell people what it is and how and what role it's playing? What was that? Sorry, you cut out.
Probably can't. I mean, I've done so much. Like I made a little documentary and I always talk about it. And obviously, like I have PCOS myself, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And then when people say like, what is it? I'm like, I don't know. It's like an endocrine disorder of basically your body can't regulate its hormones because it reacts to insulin differently, and it's got high testosterone, and it's like there's like so many different ways of interpreting PCOS. Yep. But it's like it's not an illness. I guess it is. It's a syndrome, a disorder, I guess. but it basically there's three ways you can diagnose it. One is like fertility, like do you get your period? And I don't mostly. Two is weight, I think, if you're overweight. And three is like if you have like androgen high traits. That's androgynous. No, not androgynous. My partner's trying to yell the word at me. It's like androgens, like high androgens, like hairiness or like weight gain, because it's things that testosterone causes in women. It's like acne. You can have like anxiety. The weight thing's a really big thing for a lot of women. Insulin resistant, all this kind of stuff. Insulin resistance is actually the third one, not weight gain. Weight gain's what part of that kind of whole thing. Anyway, it's very complicated.
Yeah.
But yeah, they think that it affects about 10% of women, but they think it's probably higher because you can have such varying degrees of it. I mean, you'll see some women with PCOS that are, say, quote unquote, overweight and have like a full beard, or, you know, they have terrible acne and all these things. Or you can I know some people with PCOS, like you would just never know, but maybe they have more of the fertility side of things. So it's a pain in the balls more than anything else. I mean, if you look at the sort of two options on the table, right, for women when you think about chronic disorders, there's PCOS and there's endometriosis. I would rather have PCOS than endometriosis because endo is pain, like endo is sore and it's surgical and it's like it can be crippling to your life. Yeah. Whereas PCOS is like it's more you have to manage it. It's like an ongoing management, which is so boring. I don't want to be healthy. I don't want to have to watch what I eat, but I do, because otherwise, yeah, my skin goes bad, my hair falls out, and the rest of it.
Well, one thing that I find really awesome, typically, and I'm not saying anyone should feel this, typically when we're like diagnosed with something or we have something, we might not want to share it to the world.
Yeah.
But what you've done is, you know, you did a doco, you actually talk about it. And I think that's really awesome, because sometimes it doesn't matter what it is. We might be like, oh, I just don't want to talk about it. Like, this is something that, as you said, has been like frustrating in your life, but you've actually like gone out of your way to help people as well.
I think as well, it's like PCOS can be incredibly embarrassing for people because, you know, some of the symptoms are seen as not very pretty or ladylike, let's say, like hairiness or bad skin or whatever. And so I think it can lead to like a lot of shame in people, because they're like, why would you ever admit that, you know, you've had a mustache since you were 11? And I'm like, dude, I know most women have had a mustache since they were 11, whether they've got PCOS or not. It's like, I don't know, the more you talk about it, the more you can like alleviate the shame of it. And if I can do that, I mean, I don't know how this has happened, but from being kind of, you know, a slightly insecure, like physically insecure teenager to a 33-year-old woman now, I have just lost so much, almost all of that shame. And so for me to like talk about it, yeah, I'm like, I'm happy to talk about it because I don't feel embarrassed anymore. So if me talking about it makes you feel slightly less embarrassed, maybe not get rid of all of it, but make you feel slightly less ashamed of it, or like, yeah, like hiding, or, you know, this is going to ruin my life, then, oh my God, it is my pleasure to talk about it. Because, you know, I've been with my partner for 12 years. I'm not trying to impress anyone or pretend like I have a flawless body or, you know, anything like that. I'm just like, what's the harm in sharing? And actually, there's no harm. There is only good.
Oh, okay. Brilliant. That's 10 podcasts just in itself, but just normalizing anything. Once it's spoken, one, like you and the people speaking feel better, everyone can relate in some capacity. And that's also like the goal of the podcast, is to normalize certain concepts as well. And just when it's common, you remove shame. It's like quite simple. Yeah. The journey might not be, but the actual process it's very nice. I like that. Yeah.
And it's been amazing, like, and having spoken about it so vocally for probably about 5-6 years now, the amount of people, you know, messages from women I get just saying that, you know, oh my God, I feel so alone. And you're like, yeah, we don't need to. I mean, it feels, you know, I'm not a hero or anything like that, but it's just nice for people to like see someone they might know in the media and think, oh, wow, look at her. She looks so nice on TV. And you're like, well, you know, I'm hiding a lot of acne under there. And, you know, that hair is mostly fake because a lot of it's fallen out, and, you know, struggling with my weight. You know, it's nice for them to know that, because then it's real, and they can go, oh my God, those are the things I struggle with too. And actually, yeah, it's not shameful. It's normal, and it's shit, but it's normal.
That is awesome. And what's the doco called? So maybe people can check it out if they're interested.
Well, actually, I need to put it back up. So its license ran out. It was made with TVNZ, and its license ran out, and they were kind enough to gift it to me. So I didn't own it, right? I made it for them, and they've gifted it to me. So it's in my hands, and I'm going to upload it. It's called Cystic Sisters. And actually, I'm going to upload it this week so that when people listen
okay,
to
good,
this,
because the podcast will be out next week. So maybe I can get a link and put in the episode notes. We'll see.
Yeah. So it's called Cystic Sisters, and it'll be on YouTube. And yeah, it's just a short little like light dab in. I feel like this was made a number of years ago, and I know so much more now. But at the time, it was just a little kind of like prodding the surface of what it is. And it's really, yeah, it's light and fun.
That is awesome. And I think that's a great way to do a quick rapid fire segment to wrap up the podcast. So I think you know how these things go, but if, you know, first thing that springs to mind, but if you need time to think about it, that's completely fine. Okay, we'll start with this one. How was pashing Lucy Lawless?
Hot. She lit it, and it was great. And then I got in the car afterwards, and I rang my mum immediately, and I said, Mum, I made out with Xena Warrior Princess.
And what was your mum's reaction?
Oh my God, why?
I love your parents. What's the biggest difference between Australians and New Zealanders?
Oh no.
It's a hard one, or maybe a funny difference or a difference.
Okay, I always say the difference between New Zealanders and Australians when it comes to marching, Australians march with straight legs, kind of stiff. We bend our legs in the middle of the pace. That's what I can.
You heard it here first, guys. Some real insight into the marching world. What makes you an amazing gift wrapper?
The corners. I do like the corners. You know what I mean?
I don't gift wrap. That's just not my.
When I see shit gift wrapping, I'm like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I used to like watch YouTube videos on it. And so now like I love to wrap. I'm so excited it's nearly Christmas because it means wrapping gifts.
So maybe
you got the corners.
You got 3 passions now.
I got 3 passions.
I read in your resume that I think you play the xylophone. Is that true?
Yeah, I can play the xylophone.
Can you, or did you just put?
Yeah, I mean, the xylophone is basically dinging on a piano. So it's really easy. It's the same notes. And I played the xylophone in a couple of shows that I've done. And it's such a funny instrument because it just reminds me of like kindergarten or like, you know, early childhood education. So yeah, I put it on my resume. I'm like, dude, I can play the xylophone.
That's very cool. I hope that you get a lot of work. You know, marching is one aspect.
I'm inundated with xylophone requests.
It's a big market out there.
Yeah, huge.
What is your biggest pet peeve?
I don't know if this is a pet peeve, but like, you know when you meet a humorless person?
Which person?
Like a humorless person.
Oh, yes.
It's not so much a pet peeve. I'm more in, I don't know how they survive. You know, like, I don't mean someone has to be funny, because that's like, funny is a skill and like, it's not everyone's thing. But you have to be able to have a sense of humor and to laugh at things. And when you meet someone that is truly humorless, I'm always like, what are you? Like, how did you get this far in life? It's a horrible world.
You are speaking to me on the most, like, the highest wave of consciousness, because this drives me nuts as well. And no one's brought it up. This is almost like episode 200.
Yeah.
I've heard people say, like, they're proud of it. I'm not a funny person. Or
yeah.
I was like, I'm sick. But it's almost, I've got a working theory on this. With people my age, they go, I'm not funny. Or they don't want to, like, laugh and play and have fun. And maybe it's seen as immature. From what I've seen in people in, like, my age group, it's almost my working theory that they want to, like, prove to the world that they're a serious person, and playing and having fun is not part of being a serious person. Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, they're just like, I don't have time for laughter because I'm too busy doing life. And you're like, no, you're doing it so wrong. It's so much easier if you can laugh. You
It's
don't have to laugh
such a
at me.
release. Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to laugh at me. You don't have to find me funny. I don't really give two shits. But you have to be able to be like light in the world. And when I meet them, it feels like I'm meeting a psychopath, or like a serial killer, because I'm like, what's wrong with you?
You just share your location with like your boyfriend, your family. Go, if I go missing, this is where I am.
I'm a humorless woman. Please, thoughts and prayers.
It's also like we'll chat another time, but it's also how you can deal with like grief and like some of the challenges in life is being able to. I'm sure you're well versed in that.
Yeah, for sure.
I don't normally ask this question, but I think I saw a comment. Actually, who do you get most mistaken for if you do?
Melanie Bracewell.
That's what I was thinking, but I didn't want to say it in case I was wrong. Does that happen a lot?
It used to. We obviously, like, Mel used to live in the same city as me, and now she lives in Melbourne. I used to get confused with Mel all the time because we were doing similar jobs, and then I had brown hair and she had brown hair, and then I dyed my hair blonde, and I don't want to say it. Then she dyed her hair blonde, and then I dyed my hair back to brown, and she said to me recently, I've been wanting to dye my hair back to brown, and I was like, Mel, you can't. And we didn't see it for ages. We're like, okay, like funny, tall women on TV, funny white women on TV who were tall. And then there's every now and then she said one day she was scrolling through Instagram and she passed a photo of me and was like, I don't remember taking that. And then she was like, oh my God, I see it. And I've had that moment beautiful. Too. Just where I've seen like one image of her and I've gone, oh, okay, yeah, there it is.
That is so great. I'm glad that there's a fun rivalry there. Who can be the better version? Have you got like a nickname between the two of you?
Yeah, we did. It was Hayley Sproull, which is pretty good.
That's
actually, the only thing is, for a while, yeah, it does. Hayley Sproull. But for a while, she was getting all the credit for what I was doing, but I wasn't getting the credit for what she was doing. I did I did our big comedy gala here, like our biggest comedy festival gala of the year, and I did it, and I played a song, and there was me at the piano. And then the sponsor of the gala in the caption said, Melanie Bracewell on the keys. And I was like, I played the piano for 18 years to be able to get up on that stage. And now you just play the keys. I'm so annoyed.
Oh, that's so brilliant. I'm glad that you can laugh about it because you've got a sense of humor.
Yeah, because I'm not humorless.
What are you most proud of?
I'm just like a stuck record. Marching at the Edinburgh Military Tattoo.
I love the passion. I think it's contagious.
I've done it 3 times, and it's like you march through, I don't know, how old's that castle? Like hundreds of years old. And you march down the drawbridge to an audience of 9,000 people for 30 nights in a row. Like, it's pretty epic.
I'm very happy that you found that. I think when people talk about their passions and hobbies, it's contagious and inspires others. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? I love that I look to my partner. He often has a better analysis of me. What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail? Probably like go blonde. I don't know, because I know this is going to sound really arrogant, but I'm doing it. And I
think it's amazing.
I would just maybe do it more. I don't know.
That's the goal. The goal is to like recognize like what do you want to do and then be able to do it. That's also very inspiring.
Yeah.
Last few, if you could gain any skill in the world, which one would it be?
Oh, I want to be a polyglot.
What's that?
Someone who speaks like tons of languages.
Oh, yeah.
How cool would that be to like travel the world and be like, oh, we're in France, bonjour. Oh, we're in Italy, bonjour, no.
My mum can do that, and it's so annoying.
Just to be able to speak like multiple languages.
Can you speak more than one language?
I learned French for like 4 years, and I feel like if I went to France, I could like have a conversation. But other than that, no. I speak English very well.
I'm still learning that, but that's
yeah,
the
I
goal.
can tell, but you're doing so well.
Thank you. I'm trying. Any advice you want to give to people who want to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
Yeah. What's the worst that can happen?
That could be the theme of the podcast.
It's not really advice. The advice is to ask yourself that and actually weigh it up. I mean, if you're about to jump off a bridge and you ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? The worst is die, and so don't do it. But if you're going to, I don't know, ask someone out on a date or try a new job or try a new thing or a new haircut or leave a partner or try a new life or move countries, you just have to ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? And then you'll actually realize it's not that bad, so just do it.
That's the theme of the podcast, ladies and gentlemen. And before I ask how people can follow you and keep up to date with you, what is the one question I should have asked you?
The one question you should have asked me. The one question I always get asked that you didn't ask is, do you eat all the food on the bake-off?
Oh, and?
Yes. We've done 4 seasons. Season 1, I gained 8 kgs.
No,
Season 2,
that's a good
I gained
effort.
4 kgs. Season 3, I gained 3 kgs. And this season, I gained 2. So I'm getting better. You got to eat food.
I agree. What's the art of like not eating all of it? Because there could also be like the sugar highs, and
The art is remembering that in season 1 you gained 8 kgs. So before you eat everything, just remember how hard that was to lose. No, we do a game now, which is like you go into the kitchen when you're seeing them baking, and you choose one thing. So
that's hard.
As opposed to going, I'm going to nibble on everything. You go, no, I'm going to have that. And then you have that and you're like, that's what I said I was going to have. I had it. It was yum. And there you go.
You have great willpower. I don't know if I could do that.
It doesn't always work.
Hey, that's a great way to end the podcast. Before we go, how can people follow you, keep up to date with you, and all the gazillion things you're doing? Instagram's my favorite, at Hayley Sproull. I am on Twitter, but I don't tweet, at Hayley Sproull. I am on Facebook, but no one's using that anymore, at Hayley Sproull Comedy. I am on TikTok, Hayley Sproull NZ, and I've made one video, and I said I was going to make one every week, and I've made one, and that was about 2 months ago. So that's how you can follow me. I'm also on TV everywhere. I'm on YouTube. I'm on radio. You can listen to the Fletch, Vaughan and Hayley podcast from anywhere around the world if you want to hear our radio show without the music. I'm everywhere. You just search me and I pop up. That is amazing. And those will be in the episode notes below so people can check it out. Thank you. You're amazing. You're inspiring. You're motivating. There's so many, 1,000 things that I could say. You're a legend. And yeah, we're going to have to do a part 2 sometime in the future.
Do a part 2 once the film's finished.
Oh, I would love to. That's great.
And then that's for you too, for your films.
Mine might be a bit longer, but we'll chat.
Thank you for having me. This was really enjoyable.
Often when we are scared or nervous, we can build up a story in our mind to stop us from achieving a goal or a mission. Hayley gently reminds herself through her mantra, what is the worst that can happen, that 99% of the time we will be okay, and the possible worst case scenarios are all just mental noise. What's also interesting with this mantra is that Hayley is coming from a positive perspective, in that she isn't asking how bad it can really go, but instead she's asking how well it can go, which I think is quite a beautiful way to reduce unnecessary anxiety. As Tim Ferriss outlines in his TED Talk, we suffer more in imagination than in reality. What is the worst that can happen is all about empowerment and encourages us to really give our desired goal a go. So we can all take a leaf out of Hayley's book and replace our negative thoughts with what is the best thing that can happen, as this can really propel us towards positive change. Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.